3, 2, 1. Boy, come here. We're listening to a podcast. A podcast called Saturdays or Thursdays or Tuesdays. Who the fuck knows with Moire? I'm your host, Ian Taylor, and this is episode 79, Viking Chads. Joining me tonight is the wonderful Devin King, as always, a great musician, artist, and what have you, in his own right. And
Especially the
also,
what have you.
exactly, and guest starring with us tonight is the return
Oh
of
boy.
independent filmaker and pitiful American, Stephen Beeson.
Yes.
How are you guys doing
Yes.
tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. I just got back from saving mother, avenging father, and killing Fieldner. No, it's no. I'm glad to be here. I've been planning to be here for a couple of weeks now, and I managed to see The Northman in theaters. I'm very excited about that.
Hell yeah.
It's funny. This is the first time that I've been to a theater since 2019. I'm thinking about this. The last time that I was in theaters, I saw Joker and I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and both of those were about a month apart from each other. So getting back into the cinema, feeling the energy of all 5 people there to see The Northman. Which,
wow. And you
should...
finally have a new Sigma male personality to adopt that isn't Joker.
Yes, new literally me dropped. So
can you get your shoulders to be as big?
I'm gonna try. I'm doing keto. We'll see what happens.
The Viking diet.
Got a bodybuilder.
A paleo diet. Yeah, something like that.
Oh yeah.
Just eat lots of meat and drink lots of mead and run around and scream. There you go. You got the diet down.
Eat fish and drink the bloods of your enemies.
See, you do that already, Stephen. You're good to go.
Something. Lamentations of their women. Yeah.
Also, Nathan Shapiro will be joining us later tonight. He has some insight to offer on Viking culture and has actually seen the Northman as well, so he will be joining us for that part of the discussion, so feel free to look down below. I think we're going to get into spoilers with the Northman along with all of these movies, so you have been warned. I'll put a spoiler description down below. I'll also put timestamps down below, so if you haven't seen any of these movies, you can skip to a certain film on our podcast. You can come back after you've seen the movie. First, we've got the most, the biggest kino of them all.
Oh,
it wasn't
boy,
just something I picked because it was named after the RPG system Pathfinder. I thought that would be funny. It wasn't funny. It's Pathfinder. There's nothing funny about this movie. So
yeah, it's funny because I remember before you introduce this, I do want to just throw this out there.
Sorry.
I started watching this movie last night, and I remember sending you a text like, "Is it too late to swap?" Because I was 20 minutes in, and not to bury the lead here, but this movie has a record 9% on Rotten Tomatoes.
But so does the Boondock Saints.
The Boondock Saints has its moments. This movie does not. But
let's get into it.
Go ahead.
Yes,
go ahead.
Spoilers, because you aren't going to want to be spoiled for this very special, not rushed movie that somehow has a budget of $50 million. We'll get to that in a little bit. So Pathfinder. What the fuck is this movie? Oh, so Carl Urban is found as a kid. They just rip off the backstory for Samus and Metroid, where this kid had his parents killed by the evil bad guys. Who are the evil bad guys? I don't know. They don't even have subtitles for their different language, so I was confused for half the fucking movie. So Carl Urban was found as a child by a group of English-speaking, hand-shaking Native Americans that grow him up and train him, but they also think he's a devil. He's not like the others. He's gonna bring doom to his clan because there's not an original bone in this fucking film's body. So, as he grows up, half his tribe gets violently murdered, and he goes on a killing frenzy. And that's pretty much what the story is about. And I'm 100% serious. That's literally what the movie is about.
I can sum up this movie in one sentence. This is basically Vikings versus Native Americans as portrayed by white people. That's the movie.
Well,
that perfectly
okay,
describes the film.
I want to jump in here, and I'm gonna be pretty merciless about this film. So
can't
please
wait.
do.
Before I do, I do want to say one thing to kind of preface this. So Carl Urban, I think he's a very talented actor. I think he actually is one of the more underrated actors working today. I think that I would put him up there with like Tom Hardy as far as someone who, in the hands of the right director and consistently getting the right roles, I could see him, like he's one of those guys that I could see having a run as good as like De Niro or Pacino was. You have to know how to work with him. And if you look at him in something like Amazon Prime's The Boys, I mean, even if you look at Thor Ragnarok, which I have my personal objections to, it's very formulaic of Marvel, and I think it only made that problem with Marvel properties worse. But even if it's a style and a sort of formula that doesn't particularly resonate with me, he's still funny and charming and well, he's giving his all in the performance. But he's also being directed by people who actually care. So this movie is not an example of that. This is directed by the same guy who has directed such hits as Conan the Barbarian from 2011 and the Texas Chainsaw reboot from 2003.
Oh no!
This movie, I also, we kind of touched on this earlier, but all of the Native Americans in this movie sound like they're from the Midwest. These are the most Boston-sounding Native Americans from ancient times I've ever heard.
Trying to do that Native American talk while they're at it.
This doesn't work. Yeah, no, this is honestly some of the worst acting I've ever seen.
It's so
and again,
bad.
I don't know. Again, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I really like Carl Urban. This could just be a really shitty director.
He also had nothing to work with.
Yeah, no, the script is terrible. And let me say this, the script is like nonsensical at best and generic at worst. But all of that might be forgivable if this film wasn't so goddamn ugly.
Yeah, like the brown color palette looks terrible. I think what they're trying to go for is like, oh, if it looks more like dirt, it's going to look realistic and grounded and gritty. But the Northman and Valhalla Rising show that you don't need it to have this ugly color palette in order to draw out the realism in your scenery. It just makes it look terrible, and it also makes the elements that like aren't color graded or weren't meant to be color graded that way just look so much worse. Like, yeah, this film just looks like shit, and it's a shame because there's shots that could have looked cool if it was like shot in an interesting way or cut together in an interesting way. Like, there's like the ship they walk into at the beginning of the movie is like, okay, if this was like lit and shot differently, this could be like a really cool looking scene. Like, there's something here like storyboard wise, but no, it's just let's slap a brown color palette on it and have editing that's on par with the Taken Free fence climbing scene throughout the entire movie. There are several points in this movie where I was watching it with my mother and I said, I don't know what's happening. I don't know where the characters are, what's happening, what's going on, where am I? And that's the perfect feeling that describes
I don't fully agree that everything looks kind of butt ugly. There were some cool, interesting shots like earlier on, I think. I do think that, they shot this on film and then probably over-processed it like digitally, so it's got kind of a lot of ugliness there. But yeah, often I just found myself kind of drifting away and doing other stuff while the movie was on in the background. Just it's like, well, I have to watch this. I'll just click play and then do some other stuff because.
No, I had the same experience.
Watching a movie gives you the same feeling.
No, and I want to stress, I really try not to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel bad about that if it's a movie that, like, you know, is actually trying. But
It demands your
this is
attention, and there's like, and you know that there's important stuff going on, then you really want to pay attention. But if you got other stuff
this
that you could do,
no, and this
and
thing
it doesn't
is
inspire you to keep engaged, then it's just like, yeah.
Yeah, why am I bothering
no,
watching?
and I mean the thing about this is like it's so, like you were talking about, it's so flat, it's so brown and dirty. They've put these kind of oversaturated blues all over everything.
Yeah, it's
It's
very
just
filter heavy, very color graded. This is very like generic Hollywood 101 type of filmmaking, and it's so
well,
middle of the road that it's
I
just
don't
yeah.
I don't even think that it's generic Hollywood. I mean, here's the thing. Zack Snyder is someone who's made a career out of playing with this kind of palette and this sort of like music video kind of aesthetic that they're going for. And even when I disagree with the creative decisions that he makes, there's at least some reason behind why he's making them. Like it may be totally the wrong reason, right? Like, I'm not here saying that Zack Snyder is the best director ever, but he knows what he wants to accomplish.
Yeah, there was some
And
thought
this
put
does
into it.
not no, this doesn't feel like a film by someone who knows what they're doing.
No, it just this film screams we have 3 weeks to shoot this and we gotta wrap it up fast. The whole entire movie is just so terribly paced. Nothing makes sense. There's no sense of geography with the action. There's so many action scenes. Like, there's a scene near the end where I swear they fight a bunch of these guys in the middle of the woods. Then they head into the rock cave, head up a ramp, go in there, try to hide from the monsters, go down that same ramp, climb up the right side, and I'm just like, do you guys even have a storyboard? Did you guys even write something on a napkin?
Well, it's also
you have no idea what's going on here.
It's also funny because this feels like it was directed by like 3 different people at a couple of points.
It feels like it was directed by nobody. It feels like it was directed by the crew on set.
No, and that may be it too, but like I remember watching this and like there's this pretty serious scene and there's like I think there's supposed to be like a Native American vision or quest thing, and then immediately after that Carl Urban is sort of visited by a Native American princess woman, and it just cuts to like softcore porn. Like,
I didn't watch that version. You watched the unrated version.
I saw the unrated version as well that included those scenes, but like even the ones that were put back in like didn't add much to it.
Yeah.
It added time. So it was on screen longer. Like I ended up watching the movie for like 10 more minutes longer than and I'm like I gained nothing from this other than more minutes off of my life. I did like how this movie opened up. I don't know, there was something very
I agree with
interesting
that.
About like I love the opening. It kind of reminded me of Tarzan in a weird way, where like that ape mother kind of finds this abandoned child, where this native woman finds this abandoned Viking kid, and he's kind of traumatized because he's just surrounded by dead bodies. There was something kind of bittersweet and nice about that. And then the rest of the movie happens.
Also, sorry, I'm glad you mentioned the tonal changes, Steven, because there's a scene where they're watching dickhead boyfriend guy, the guy who's like into the princess, but he knows that Carl Urban's into the princess. He doesn't like that trope. Like when his character is like getting his face melted, it's like a pretty serious scene. They're like, holy shit, he's dying, and then the other Native American kills him, and he's like, are you done with your revenge? It's like, are you cracking a joke? You just saw your best friend get brutally murdered. What the fuck is this coming from?
Because the scene in the unrated cut was similar. Like there's a Native American vision quest, and it's like super serious and something, and then she walks in and she says something like, and I swear to God, inside you there are two wolves.
Oh, yeah, that line.
She completely messes up the fucking line.
Yeah.
or they completely like misinterpret the whole meaning of that line, or I don't. Yeah.
And she says that, and then she's like, one of them is love and one of them is hate. And he
Which
says,
one am
so
I?
which one? But yeah, something like that. And she's like, it's whichever one you feed most. And then they just start having sex.
Oh, the dialogue.
Weirdest. It's the weirdest transition. It's so cringe. It looks like they're very uncomfortable. It's just
they have no chemistry at all.
It's like the screenwriter did a quick like search into metaphors and then just shoehorn that one in there without really reading into it.
Random
and it turns it into a metaphor. I mean, there are some nuggets of inspiration here and there, but it just didn't know what to do with them. They're just kind of in there.
It's such a bizarre film, and I mean, it's just all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think of like one thing that I liked. Honestly,
coming into this, I was like an hour and 20 minutes in, and I'm like, I feel like there's nothing I can really say here that was interesting, or I don't even remember. Like I'm hardly even watching the movie. Then I guess he's in the middle of some battle. Again, I just completely was blanking out into what was happening up to this point. And he falls into the water, and this native, tribe person that he saw as a father figure just appears to him as a vision and starts talking to him like, you're not gonna die yet, are you? And they're like bubbles coming out of his mouth, and I just fucking bursted out laughing. Like, this is the funniest fucking like vision like by a dead person that I've seen. It's hysterical.
It's
and
just the Richard Nixon scene from Nice Guys.
I don't think it was intended to be, but it was fucking hilarious, and I'm like, okay, this is fun now. It took me an hour and 22 minutes into the movie to find something interesting to talk about.
That's just it. This movie is... I was really hoping this movie would be so bad it's good. Just hit that sweet spot, like in the name of the Kane or under garbage fantasy movies, but it's so...
It had more scenes like that. It would have been like,
yeah, more.
I wish they had more absurd out of the water or out of left field kind of things like that, where they were trying to go for a certain effect, but it has a complete opposite effect. That would be interesting.
Yeah,
but most of this is just like,
and
barely competently made kind of.
Did anyone notice that that's also Clancy Brown? That's the big bad Viking.
And I can't understand anything he's saying because there's no subtitles. Why are there no subtitles? It adds nothing. It means nothing.
I had subtitles in mine.
Wait, what?
No. There were subtitles in the version that I watched. Yeah.
There were no subtitles in the Amazon Prime version. I think
the best written dialogue was when they were speaking Icelandic. Which is and that's probably the most authentic aspect of it, is probably the Icelandic dialect. But the depiction of the Vikings is very off. They didn't really have helmets that looked like that. That's very much
they just look like
an opera. Like we'll have someone clarify this, but like they look like orcs from fucking Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
which is probably where they got the design note from.
Yeah, they look like Nazguls and orcs just hate fucked and made bad guys, and those are the villains in this movie. Yeah. And the Amazon Prime version.
The point I was getting to is like the horned helmets is something that the opera made up to depict Vikings because they wanted something visually interesting to show. Yeah, so that's where that comes from, and this movie falls victims into thinking that's what Vikings look like, which luckily is a trend, is something that changed when people actually do their fucking homework and read into what Vikings were actually like. Which I don't know why we aren't talking about How to Train Your Dragon,
Oh,
I mean, honestly, I mean, the original Thor would be better than this, like from the Marvel movies.
Basically, any other movie would be better than this.
Literally any other movie, yes.
I'll watch Space Jam: A New Legacy again. Actually, no. This movie's shorter than that. That's the one thing I like about this movie, is that it's mercifully short. Which is more than what I can say about Space Jam and New Legacy.
If we're talking about movies that butcher Norse mythology, but that's also interesting, literally anything else would do.
Literally. Any other Viking movie. Go watch I don't know. Go watch the worst episodes of Vikings, and that's probably better than this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, it's not incompetently made enough that it's like charmingly poorly done, and it's not interesting or, I mean, you could tell that it was professionally made with like a crew and whatnot, but there was just no direction and no interest in the storytelling that really grabbed my
It's
attention and really
just
made the
so
thing interesting.
boring.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so repetitive.
and that is a term that I have tried to cancel out of my vocabulary when reviewing movies because it's so overused. But I would apply it here. I was just bored and uninterested, uninvested. That's the only time I'm ever going to use that word on this podcast.
I think it's fair. I think this film is deserving of it. There's really nothing we can say about this. I mean, it is a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes.
And that's the only time I'm gonna say I agree with a Rotten Tomatoes rating.
No, I actually think that's 8% too high. This is just terrible.
This is a movie that talks about pathfinding and couldn't find its own path there. That's my review.
And the villains themselves, like, they could have at least done a good job of this, making them cool or intimidating, but they're just so stupid. They're so stupid. Like, there's a scene where they're on a mountain, and and Clyde Sprout's like, "Alright, we could fall. I got a great idea. Let's all attach ourselves with rope." So, yeah, I'm just like, that's a terrible idea. Because if you do that, then if one person falls, every other person falls. And sure enough, that's what happened. And I guarantee you they were just like, I have... The screenwriters must have wrote themselves into a corner just thinking, I don't know how to get rid of the bad guys. I don't know how the heroes are going to get out of this one. I know. Well, just throw them on the side of a mountain with the worst CGI snow and CGI mountain backdrops imaginable. This movie has the same a higher budget than Annihilation. I want you to think on that information while I carry on with this. So, and we just need an excuse to get rid of them. So just time all the rope, and they'll all die except for Clancy Brown because he has main villain plot armor. Even though Carl Urban one shots every single other guy, there isn't even like interesting like action tension. Like there's so many scenes where it's like you could have done something interesting, but you didn't. Like the first time where he's first to fight the other guys, I'm like, okay, you're pulling an Aquaman here, so he's gonna fight the big baddie. He's gonna lose and barely be able to get away, but he kind of has to get his grips and fight him at the end of the movie. It's like, that's kind of interesting, like action storytelling there. But no, he just fights a few guys and runs away. It's like every single time they could do something interesting, they just don't do it.
No, I'm also gonna just bring up the fact that there's a scene in this where Carl Urban and I don't know, some people have to like cross a river of ice.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to tell that that's even what's going on.
It's so dark.
Or that's
so poorly edited.
There's like one shot where you see ice cracking, and I thought that was kind of neat. But why do I feel like there isn't any danger here? Like that's a beautiful shot of him walking on the ice. But
it's just the ice breaks and they all get up. It's fine. Nothing happened. There's no consequences here. Moving on.
No, this is... I mean, it's also worth noting that this is a director who is not coming from a background of film. He's actually coming from a background of commercial work.
You don't say.
You don't say.
No, I mean, it's funny. And I mean, I hate to say that because there are directors that have come from backgrounds of like music video or advertising that
David
have done...
Fincher.
Really well. I mean, but this is like...
Oh yeah, I mean, fucking Michael Bay was huge in commercials and music videos before he got into filmmaking. But then he's also Michael Bay.
Well, I mean, Mark Romanek, who did 1 Hour Photo, came from a background similar to that.
Oh yeah, and he's great, and he's an absolutely legendary music video director. Like, I love his work.
Yeah, Michel Gondry did music videos before directing Eternal Sunshine. Like, it happens all the time.
Oh yeah,
but this just isn't it.
You can tell that this guy knows how to make a thing that looks like a movie, but doesn't really know how to make a movie. You know, like I think
Bernard Rose, who made the original Candyman, came from a background of commercials and music videos. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, that background in and of itself is a red flag, but it's
oh no, like most of the time it's a good thing that you have some kind of film experience, but in this case, it shows that it doesn't always translate to the larger, you know, format. Like this guy can
no, and
maybe
I
keep
mean,
you engaged narratively for 30 seconds, but it runs out of steam really quickly. And that's how
I
I
mean,
felt watching it.
honestly, I think that, like, I've seen Yui Bowl films that were at least more enjoyable than this.
Oh man,
It is
I
so
yeah.
exhausting and so ugly and so creatively bankrupt.
So
There is
poorly
not
written.
so poorly written. I mean, we haven't even touched upon the kind of weird white savior like trope here that's just so
yeah.
odd and
Well,
like gross.
I kind of tore off that Band-Aid right off the bat, saying, you know, that this is like white people's idea of, uh, you know, these people
It's
who and probably
just
just
awful. And this is,
yeah.
I don't know, I'll say this. Like, you know, when you look at the director's other work, I mean, he did a reboot of Friday the 13th, which, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Friday the 13th, but I'm less offended if you're going to take something like Friday the 13th, which is infamous for having kind of, you know, bad sequels or bad reboots or like, you know, so bad it's good cheese. I mean, the whole thing is like a ripoff of Halloween to start with. So I'm less offended if you're going to do something to that, but this is supposedly a remake of a Oscar-winning Academy Award for Best Foreign Language film.
Now, why
that
do I
think
think
Oscar nominated? I don't think it
it's
won,
Oscar
but
nominated.
still.
Yeah, and
I
why
mean,
do I?
This is funny because like, yeah, the guys Nils Gaup, said he made this quote here. Twice Hollywood has remade my films. Both times they have managed to make the worst movie ever, for Pathfinder and then also Head Above Water.
Oh.
wow.
And
Yeah, why do I feel like
yeah,
this movie's nothing like the original? It's just a very strong sneaking
yeah.
suspicion.
I
Yeah.
think you're onto something.
I'm done talking about this hot piece of garbage, and I'm giving it a 2 out of 10, maybe lower. Who knows? But you know, it's short.
I have one more fun fact to read. Apparently, for a single day of filming, actor Jack Black filled in for an Indian extra as part of a dare by actor and close friend Carl Urban. This movie is so enthralling that I'm reading the IMDb facts verbatim.
And there's barely any IMDb facts. Like, I looked for the trivia, and there's barely
No,
any
no,
facts.
and that was what was funny is because I looked at this film and I went. Normally, you know, we share reviews in the Discord chat to kind of see how far off we are from kind of like, you know, the sort of opinion of like critics or, you know, so that we could maybe agree or disagree or kind of pull from, you know. And we'll share stuff like Mark Kermode or, you know, some film YouTubers. And what was funny was when I looked up this film on YouTube and I put in Pathfinder review, just to have a good baseline on what people thought of it, the only thing that came up was for the Nissan Pathfinder, the car.
Yes.
That's how little people care about this.
Oh, yeah.
It is a very generous 2 out of 10. This movie
I
is
found one review from like Simply Media from literally like 12 years ago, and even back then they're saying that this movie's boring and uninteresting. Like it didn't even have a positive reception when it came out.
What would you
But
give
yeah.
it, Devin?
Do I have to give it a rating?
Yes.
So this movie wasn't as painfully bad as like Driller Killer or or as, you know, just eye rolling as the original Godzilla vs. Kong Americanized version.
Screw you.
I was just I mean, I was just so, you know, unimpressed. Well, no, I had one good laugh with that whole scene. Like that scene, just by itself, out of context, is a 6.9. The rest of this movie is like 0. I just was so evenly unimpressed by it throughout.
Yeah, and that's higher than your negative score for King Kong vs. Godzilla.
Oh, I forgot I gave that a negative score.
Oh, you did. I include that into the final group ranking too.
Wow,
honestly, I would give this a negative like 10. This is terrible.
What about 1 out of 10?
This is the film that I'd scrape the bottom of the barrel with, so I could see the bottom of the barrel. Like I'm, you know.
Why else?
It's horrendous. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. I'm sorry, guys. I thought that movie would be a lot funnier. Valhalla Rising.
I feel like we need to run into somebody that loves this movie and just tell us why we're all wrong, because I feel like, yeah, we're just in unanimous agreement
but
here.
Here's the thing: is there anyone that you could even find that loves this film?
I had a buddy at work when I mentioned Pathfinder. He says, "Oh, I like that movie." Like he.
Yeah, you need to get him in here.
I need to get him to explain himself, because I'm really failing to see what was appealing about this.
Yeah, and ask him what drugs he's taking.
Actually, there was one Letterboxd review that I saw that gave it a 5 stars. And
I'm sorry.
had a really long yeah. I'll pull it up. I'm just morbidly curious what, if anything, is interesting about this movie.
All right, lay it on us.
Okay. So, this comes from Nathan Exon. Yeah, he gave it a 5 stars. In the Unholy Radiance, which is Marcus Nipple's feature filmography, there are 2 broad categories: teen slasher and sword and sorcery. Pathfinder falls manifestly on the latter camp, but that does not prevent it from also being a horror movie, specifically of the alien invasion format, the kind with unfamiliar languages, weapons, technologies brought to bear in overwhelming slaughter, only to be defeated by guerrilla tactics and intimate knowledge of the landscape. What prevents Pathfinder from being another iteration of Red Dawn or First Blood, a clear ascent, is that it is drenched in horror mythology and iconography. It's full with every bit of slasher experience points amassed in the making of 2003's such a famous massacre at work here. And worship certainly does. Pathfinder gets it right that the story of European incursion in the Americas has been genocidal barbarely since the very beginning. A dragon ship born horde of horned, skull-faced maniacs high on bloodlust and mass destruction. That this film once again has a good white person adopted by a non-white culture to act as its champion is a questionable here, as it always is, but at least makes some amount of plot sense, unlike many films which employ that tired offensive trope. Also, Viking war toboggan. I'm not going to read the whole review. I don't want to get flagged by the guy.
No, he gushes over this whole thing. I posted it in the chat. This is.
Did he watch a different movie? Why are you tying it to alien horror? They're not aliens. They're Vikings. What in the actual
where
fuck?
Where is he getting Red Dawn from? I mean.
That's the comparison that, like, the second I read that, I'm like, I have to read this out loud for Steven, because Steven loves that movie and I didn't care for it.
Well, the Vikings communists? I mean, this is incredible.
I mean, okay.
I do love Red Dawn.
This review made watching this piece of shit worth it. Just reading this review. This is hysterical.
No.
I agree. I agree. And
Valhalla Rising.
Yeah.
Devin, would you do the honors?
Please.
Oh, gladly. So, Valhalla Rising is a 2009 film from Mr. Nicholas Winding Refn, which this came out prior to his successful film that everyone knows him for, Drive, and is the basis of the whole Sigma male bullshit identity thing. But needless to say, Valhalla Rising stars Mads Mikkelsen. I'm probably butchering that. I'm running on fumes today, if you can't tell. And he's this mute character. He doesn't say a word through the whole thing, but he has quite a terrifying presence on screen as One Eye, which is the name that the little boy gives him because he has one eye. You wonder, the true depths of the child's imagination. Anyway, but yeah, they go on this quest. These Christian crusaders are trying to find the next Jerusalem, um, and they're subject to much mayhem on their journey. Um, I thought this was a really interesting film. There were a lot of moments that really grabbed me, but a lot of times where I don't know, I felt like there was maybe some emptiness to it. There was some uh, primordial element though that I really appreciated. Just I like the opening text saying that this is just, at the beginning there was just man and there was nature. Like this is a very primal, elemental type of film that you can tell was made for on a very limited budget, and he was really experimenting with these kind of ideas. There were these little visual montages and cutaways that illustrate certain ideas, although they have some very obvious use of like masking and like digital paintbrushing, which is a technique that they use in color grading pretty frequently, although it's not so subtle here when you see people's faces kind of be lit sort of unnaturally. Uh, and there's some like red filters in these things. But I thought it was a really interesting, creative, visual motif that he was creating here. Although I would guess I wasn't quite enjoying it as much as I thought I would, because this definitely seems like the type of film that'd be right up my alley. But I still thought it was really interesting, film from Nicholas's back catalog.
Well, I mean, it's worth noting that, yeah, as you said, this is before Drive for Nicholas Winding Refn, and this is also before Hannibal for Mads Mikkelsen. So you have two people who are kind of like almost about to hit it big within like 2 to 3 years of each other. And, this definitely feels like it was made on a budget. It feels like it was probably an independent film more than like a studio. I'm not exactly sure, but it definitely feels that way. I think, and I'm a pretty big fan of Refn. I love what he does and, the way that he presents things and his sort of style that's, the stark lighting and, the neon sort of aesthetic. And I will say this. I mean, I think that it's good. I think that it's a little bit of a lesser work. I feel like he's playing with a lot of things that he doesn't really perfect until like Only God Forgives. This feels very much like he's experimenting with those things. Only God Forgives was actually dedicated to Alejandro Jodorowsky, I believe. And yeah, Jodorowsky. And so I feel like, Jodorowsky, of course, made The Holy Mountain, El Topo, all of which were like acid westerns, these sort of surrealist, LSD kind of like neon lit westerns. And I feel like this is an acid Viking movie. And
yeah.
That's basically the best way that I know to put it. I did wind up watching, there's a channel on YouTube called Vikings React, and they did an hour long deep dive into this film and sort of the culture and the history. And I thought that was fascinating, maybe even more so than the film itself, where they were talking about even the lines of dialogue, where the pagan old culture is talking about how bizarre it is that these Christian zealots are eating their god.
Yeah, yeah, no, I really like the way that they were putting it and really showing, Christianity kind of its early forms and it being starting almost as a sort of a cult, or at least in the eyes of
Well,
these people that are
well, no, and it's kind of different because you see stuff like this and you think about like the Knights Templar and they're going around and slaying dragons, and this is kind of subverting that in a way, and talking about the people who are seeing this like this is weird, like
yeah.
this doesn't make sense.
And it's like they only have one god, we have many gods. Fuck them, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
no,
And I thought that was super interesting. I really liked how stripped down and elemental it was. It really feels like just people living in this landscape, and they only have hear, tell, or experience to sort of inform their worldviews and what that kind of looks like. Like I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's a fascinating film. I'm glad to have watched it. I don't know that I connected with it quite as much as I wanted to. Like I said, this is a lesser work from a director that I love, and it's sort of like I like it because he did it. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, like you can see where he's going to be coming from this film. Like this film feels kind of like a rough sketch of the things that he would perfect later on, and I feel like he's really honed in on that craft since. And for
Oh,
that, it is
definitely,
super
yeah.
valuable. Like, this I haven't seen his like early stuff or his like Dutch films. I think that'd be really interesting to look into. But I
Yeah,
remember,
the Pusher
yeah,
trilogy.
I remember going back and seeing like Stanley Kubrick's very first film that he ever made, which is something he tried to bury. He didn't want people to see, and really, like, I'm not going to spoil that film, but the way it plays out is kind of like a really particularly ambitious Twilight Zone episode. Like, and I can see how he would have hated it, but for me, as someone who really loves and admires his work, I really value seeing it because you can see how he started from this very low level, but was really had a vision he was really trying to go for, and you can see the seeds of that really being planted. So I feel
And
like
that's kind of how I feel about this. And it's also, in fairness, I mean, I have the same reaction to Eraserhead. A lot of people say that
yes,
Eraserhead is like Lynch's best, and I disagree with that. But I think I only disagree with that because I've seen, Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway and Fire Walk
hmm
with Me. Like I've seen him perfect the things that he's doing in Eraserhead. So I think this is a similar situation where it's like this is a really good blueprint for the guy that that I love. You know what I mean? Like this
yeah,
is
no,
kind of like
exactly.
this is like Reservoir Dogs with Tarantino. This is a very early sketch.
hmm
What did you think, Ian? You've been quiet. I'm afraid to ask.
I really, really didn't like this movie.
Oh
I
God,
just
here we go.
But you didn't like it not as much as the last film, I'm sure.
Oh fuck no! This is way better than that film. For starters, it looks much better. It's
Oh yeah,
edited
Right.
properly. It has a great soundtrack. Like I don't know who did the music for this film, but it has a killer soundtrack. Like I've officially added that to my Dungeons and Dragons playlist even, and it fits the
Yeah.
crazy vibe of the film so well. I think the problem is like it's empty and stilted to a fault in a way that doesn't like reference films like he are very stylized and very artsy in a way, but usually finds narratives where that kind of fits. But in this kind of gritty, harsh setting, seeing people like sitting in introspective poses or standing perfectly in the scenery so it looks nice for the camera, that stiltedness doesn't really work for this kind of setting. And I think that's something Robert Eggers nails in the Northman was getting over that hurdle to make for a more naturalistic feeling movie. But here,
Well,
I just feel
I
it
would
really
argue.
clashes with the movie.
Well, I mean, and there again, I mean, the thing that I was kind of trying to allude to begin with is like this is not a traditional Viking movie
I
in
don't
the
need it to be
way
either.
that Jodorowsky wasn't making traditional westerns. You know what I mean? Like this is definitely you're taking that framework and trying to place your style on top of
Yeah, and
it.
that's fine, but I think the problem is I'm just not invested in the world or the characters at all because I feel
I
like I
mean,
know nothing about it. And the thing is,
well,
like, you don't need dialogue to convey that. The thing aspect I was most excited about with this movie was that there was barely any dialogue. Was that the protagonist never sleeps? Sorry, never spoke.
hmm
Well, he doesn't sleep either. But something like a movie like Embrace the Serpent, all right, is completely visual storytelling, not a word of dialogue, but it has actors that actually express emotions and actually has like a believable world and you can tell so much about the characters and the world they inhabit just by their actions and the way they look at each other and the way they interact with the scenery. Like, they don't need a single line of dialogue but they convey so much. But this movie barely has any dialogue, but it conveys nothing. Like, there's just nothing in
Well, I
place
think
of
it's more.
sacrificing dialogue and for the sake of atmosphere that
well, I mean,
wasn't interesting enough for me to be attached to it.
I disagree with that. I think there is I think again it's rough. It's on a budget, but I think that there is something.
That's not the part that
that's
bothers
trying
me.
I think there's something trying to be communicated here. I think you're maybe being a bit too harsh.
Trying to be communicated, sure. Successfully communicated, no.
Well, in your opinion, but I mean, I think that this is a statement on faith. I think that this is a statement on, changing cultures and, Christian sort of identity and the lack of faith. I mean, and like strangers in a strange land. I mean, it's obviously there's a lot wrapped up in here, but they probably did not have the budget or the means to execute this maybe in quite the way that they wanted to. And I think it's commendable. I mean, I would put this.
My problem is
honestly, I would put this. I would put this about on par with the Neon Demon. It's not my favorite from him by far, but I didn't hate it. I think it's well made for what it is, and I found it interesting.
Well, the thing is, like, the budget isn't the problem for me. The problem is just the approach. Like, I really don't like how it feels like all of the actors were directed to act as stilted and awkward and robotic as possible, and that doesn't really work for me in a story like this. A story like this needs to feel like visceral in a way. We really need to feel the emotions of the characters and what they're going through, but I just feel nothing. Like, Mads Mikkelsen is one of my favorite actors of this generation. Like, I think that guy is, if he gets a better agent, that guy is going places. He is one of my favorites. But Nicholas Winding Refn took that and turned him into an emotionless, stilted, awkward cyborg of a character. And I can't forgive him.
I think he had a very intimidating presence, despite the fact he never said anything. He was just
he looked cool,
elemental and primordial in his thing. Yeah, like his whole, makeup design was fantastic as well.
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
I do think that everybody being stilted and contemplative didn't quite make sense. Like, I think there should have been more dynamics in the characters themselves, and they all someone might be particularly quiet, but the other person might be more particularly vocal and outwardly and ignorant. Like, I think if you had more of a variety of characters that view things differently and seeing the dynamics of that play out, I think would make for a much more kind of interesting, engaging story. I did see one comment that or one review saying that this feels like a kind of spiritual successor to Adir, Wrath of God, which is the Werner Herzog film. I have yet to see that one, but I am interested in what kind of parallels might be drawn between
that movie is very different because it has a similar like atmosphere to it, but the characters all feel unique. There's actual dynamics. There's interesting dialogue. There's actual emotions with the characters.
No, and I mean, I kind of, I do agree with you to some extent. They kind of touch upon that, like what you're talking about with, there is a character who, towards the end of the film, essentially stands up and, spits in the face of God. I mean, there's an attempt to do that. And I would disagree that Mads Mikkelsen's character is a cyborg. I think that there's maybe just a bit more to it. I mean, he does show, compassion towards the young boy.
Does he?
I mean,
I didn't even get that.
Yeah, no, he does. He offers him protection. He's the only person that he doesn't try to viciously murder.
Okay, but does he emotionally convey that? Is that seen in the character's eyes?
No, because he's a mute. He's a mute, and he only has one eye.
Have emotions.
I mean, there's only so much that you can communicate.
Mutes can have emotions.
I think this film is so nihilistic that the most moral character in it is a cold-blooded mute character.
No, I think that's definitely it. And I mean, I don't. I don't know. I disagree. And don't get me wrong. I mean, again, this is not my favorite Refn film. This film is definitely flawed. But I don't know that I agree that it's as flawed as you're quite making it out, Ian. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot here, and I think it's kind of wrapped up in a very noble attempt with a very limited budget and a bunch of people
who experiment. It's a noble experiment that later paid off in his other films. Like, he was going for something here, and there's a lot of stuff to appreciate in it, and it was worth seeing. Like, there were moments that, I thought were really great. There were times I kind of found myself drifting, and I would pause and come back to it, which is something I really hate to do. Like, I really want to be fully engaged in the film whenever possible. And again, there's lots of great stuff to appreciate in this. It just doesn't quite all come together as well as it could have. I don't know if a different edit would have come, or if they just didn't have quite enough material to work with, but again, this is a film that helps you appreciate this guy's later films. Like, everyone talks about
and I mean, I think it's,
and people like us kind of ruin it for people with how we talk about it. But watching this film, you can see where he came from, and you can really appreciate the craftsmanship that went behind Drive more, seeing where he was coming from.
Well, there was an
for sure. I think that's.
I'll give it that. Like, it was very ambitious. It reminded me of Terrence Malick's worst films in a way, where it's like the ambition is there. There's an interesting style and direction to it visually, but it just doesn't feel like you know what the fuck you're doing. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a clear direction you want to take the story.
It takes a while to know what you're doing in a way. I mean, it's like
that's true.
And you can't know until you try, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean,
that's one good aspect about it.
I'm actually curious now. So, let's see here. Valhalla Rising came out in 2009. So, Nicholas Winding Refn, at this point, I know he had done his early kind of Danish work with the Pusher trilogy.
Bronson came out a year before this.
He did Bronson the year before. But there again, I mean, Bronson was $300,000 budget. I mean, this is
might be his best movie.
Well, I mean, that's fine, but what I'm trying to say is, I mean, this is definitely, it's an independent project. I feel like more people would probably be kinder to this if you slapped an A24 logo in front of it. You know what I mean?
We'll talk about that later.
I disagree with that. I'd still hate it. Well, there's some A24 films I don't like. Like, I don't want to make it seem like
but I mean, as far as those kind of independent, ambitious art house films, I mean, this is definitely. It has vibes, as my friend Kristen would say. For sure. So I don't know.
Just put this right up there with Green Knight.
Yeah, I was less bored with the Green Knight.
Way rather watch this.
I immensely disagree. That film is way less boring than this, and it's longer. Well, because there's more of a goal there. There's something there.
We will have to agree to disagree.
Also, actors can act in that movie. Actors have emotions.
Mads Mikkelsen can act.
Mads Mikkelsen is an amazing actor. He's one of my favorites, but it's like he was directed to act like a robot. Like John Denzel Washington was directed to act like a robot in Tenet. Like, they're both have the potential to be great actors.
There's a lot wrong with Tenet, and John David Washington is not it.
I think he's one of them, though. But again, he was directed to act that way because he's been much better in other movies. Like, I don't know what directors are trying to convey by making these actors act as stilted and awkward as possible. Like, it doesn't work for me, man. They're not robots. Give them emotions.
Well, and I mean, this is something that, Refn has talked about, that he was always sort of drawn to these strong, silent leads, like your, Steve McQueen type. And here he kind of takes that very literally.
A little too far.
But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I liked it. I didn't love it. It's about on par with Neon Demon from what I've seen of his filmography. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think if you're into this kind of atmospheric sort of slow burn psychedelia, you might have a better time with it. But I think you might enjoy Only God Forgives more, because I feel like that kind of combination of Jodorowsky and Lynch and like that really just silent character. Again, I feel like that's where he really brings it together. And Drive is great too. I mean, it's a classic, but yeah, this one, it's a little rough, admittedly. So
also, do you want to know what the budget is for this movie?
Again, there's lots of elements in this that I appreciate, and you can see those Jodorowsky, Lynch, and Terrence Malick influences in here. But it's kind of like phased. It's kind of like a phased relationship between audio sources that once some of those things get brought together, they kind of cancel each other out, and it just feels somewhat void. But you kind of have to pull from your influences to sort of find your own voice in it. And I feel like this film was a stepping stone toward him finding his own voice in filmmaking. So it's not my favorite of his. I'd probably give it something like a 6. I could bump that to a 6.9 for the joke, but really, more realistically, it's like a 6. But it does help me appreciate his other films more. I still have to see Neon Demon and Bronson and a couple of the other ones, but
yeah, I need to see Bronson as well, and I also need to see his limited series on Amazon Prime, Too Old to Die Young, and I'm gonna give this. Yep, I'm gonna give this a 7.5.
It's very ambitious, in the same way a bad Terrence Malick film is ambitious. Looks beautiful, sounds beautiful, but for me, it was just an experience that was so devoid of nothing. It was very repetitive. It had no interesting characters or dynamics whatsoever. Yeah, sure, it has messages about the crisis of faith, and dominating other societies to make it your own. But I don't know what the film was actually trying to say about it. I don't know what the film stance the film was taking on it, besides the fact that I was insisting that I was bringing it up. And you don't have to be super unsubtle, but you need to be something. And this film was just nothing for me, and it wasted one of my favorite actors. So that's a crime against humanity, and for that, it gets a 4 out of 10 for me, maybe even lower.
Oh, that is rough. Come on,
couldn't stand
you
this
gotta
movie,
bump
man.
that up to a 6.
Nope, that's 4 out of 10. Feel comfortable with that.
Steven, for you, I'll give it a 6.9. Just
no,
to help kind of counter that a bit.
I'm not putting on the fun rating.
It was a way more worth my time than Pathfinder.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, a 4 is like, that's awful.
But getting a drill shoved up my ass would still be a more rewarding experience than Valhalla Rising. Sorry, more than Pathfinder. Sorry, more than Pathfinder. That's what I meant. My apologies.
Sure.
I need to ping our guy. Hold on a second.
Yeah, ping our guy.
We are moving on a lot more briskly than I imagined we would be.
Well, I mean, there's not a lot to talk about with Pathfinder.
But there is a lot to talk about with this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, though, bud. Fuck yeah.
Should I go ahead and introduce our next film?
Let me just wait a second for Devin to pin our guy. Well, let me know when you're.
Guy?
Yeah, your buddy guy. Let me know when you're done.
My buddy guy.
Then I'll have Steven take it away. Spoiler alert, by the way. This film just came out, and screw it, we're gonna spoil
I just watched it today, this afternoon. Went to our local little theater and saw a little matinee. And it was like me, my 2 siblings, and then like 3 other people. Incredible. And it was like at the theater way at the back too. Like there's like 8 theaters or 8 rooms, and this is number 4, and it's right at the back next to 5. And yeah, just way at the back. That's how popular this movie is right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's also interesting. I went to see it with 2 friends of mine who are husband and wife. So it was really, but it was the 3 of us, and then there was about, I would say, maybe 4 other people in the theater, maybe 5. So this was like maybe 10 people at most. It's unfortunate because I think that this film does have blockbuster appeal, and I think more people should see it. But we'll get into that shortly, I'm sure.
All right, yeah, Nathan Shapiro is here, so why don't you introduce the Northman, Steven?
Oh
Take
boy, the Northman.
The Northman, baby.
Oh yeah, the Northman. It is the 2022 film from director Robert Eggers. Robert Eggers, of course, made The Witch back in 2015, which he himself, the Vitch, yes, which he himself has kind of come out and said was maybe not as good as he wanted it to be. I wasn't a fan of that. He really hit it big with his sophomore effort, The Lighthouse, in 2019, with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and he's back again this year. You can see this in theaters today with an epic historical action film. It is very art house. It stars Nicole Kidman, Alexander Skarsgård, Anya Taylor-Joy, Ethan Hawke, Willem Dafoe, and Bjork. And with a cast like that, what is this about? My God! Well, it's about Hamlet, except not Hamlet. This is the story of a young Viking prince whose father is viciously slain by an evil uncle conspiring to take the throne, and a young boy that makes a promise to avenge his father, save his mother, and kill Fieldner, his evil uncle. And yeah, we are going to be spoiling the crap out of this, but things happen, and it definitely subverts your expectations in a good way as to the typical sort of Hamlet fare that we've seen, maybe even in something like The Lion King. It uses that as a framework, but it definitely does its own thing. It is I would call it an elevated blockbuster in a way. It's up there with Blade Runner 2049 or Mad Max Fury Road. And I think in years to come, this film will certainly change the way we look at films. This is a modern masterpiece. This may just be a movie of the year. What did you guys think?
Hey, Nathan. I liked it. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty fantastic, guys. How are y'all?
Good.
Well.
Sound like you're in a car driving somewhere.
I am in a car driving somewhere. I was helping my stepsister move, and I was there a little longer than expected.
Okay. I thought you were driving to go see the Northman again.
I may as well be, right? It was fucking fantastic. I would definitely see it again. I thought, as a fan of both Shakespeare and Viking culture, it was just a treat. I loved every second of that movie. It was fantastic.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, no, I was just going to say, I mean, as far as Shakespeare, I mean, it definitely does its own thing. It really does kind of like, you think you've seen Hamlet, you think you've seen this kind of story before, but it winds up twisting that a little bit and surprising you with these twists that come out of nowhere. And it's so good. And it doesn't feel insulting to the audience. It feels well earned.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like any good Shakespeare adaptation, it does its own thing. I feel like if it were to just be Hamlet beat for beat, that would be, I feel, a disservice to the source material and the audience as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of the performances are great. The cinematography is incredible. I'm struggling to find a negative thing to say about it, honestly. I think this is definitely movie of the year so far.
Yeah, there are a couple things that I would say. I mean, so I literally just watched this today, so it's still kind of fresh. I'm also Um, have been up for quite a while. Like I was up since like 2 a.m. Yesterday, or this morning technically. So maybe I'm just kind of in a daze. But there were like a lot of things that I noticed. Like they did a lot of these kind of one take battle sequences, which are really awesome. And that's always, a difficult thing to stage. It's very well coordinated. There were some like times where he like kills somebody that was waiting to get axed, I've noticed, and other kind of actions that seemed like they were kind of directed for camera that maybe didn't quite, that play out sort of realistically. But that said, these are like nitpicks in an otherwise very kind of grand depiction of these events. I was listening to a review from Deep Focus Lens, and I love some of her reviews, as you guys know, and as Steven especially knows. But she was saying how like
Yeah.
a lot of it didn't really like grab or work for her. And honestly, like for the first little while of the film, it felt very like linear. Like I guess coming into a Robert Eggers film when I'm expecting, you know, the lighthouse levels of, mind fuckery to happen, it was kind of oddly linear for the first while. Like it was beautifully executed. I loved Björk's on-screen presence. I am going to correct your pronunciation. It's Björk, rhymes with jerk, to quote her. Uh,
Ah,
in
okay.
terms of pronouncing her name.
Well, we should
I
we should ask Lars von Trier about that. I mean,
Oh, actually, this is actually really funny. The one other like major role she's known for, she's done another odd one prior to this, but Dancer in the Dark is about a woman who starts going blind, and in this one she is blind,
She
and
completed
she's
the
literally
fine.
transformation.
Yeah.
and she's literally just in one scene of the film, but I absolutely loved it. It was like ASMR in Icelandic, and that's like a niche thing that I'm really into. So I absolutely love that scene that she was in. Um,
Well, and I would almost argue with you that it's only one scene because I got the impression that she may have been the ravens as well in an odd sort of spiritual way, and
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought that was really unique. I mean, that was just how I interpreted it, but there's definitely the way that things are shot and the kind of transition to the black and white, the way that she appears, you
Mm.
almost get the sense that she's like a vision, kind of a spirit creature.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
there's definitely a lot of carryover. There's like little flashbacks, so they really make the most of her presence in the film, and I do really appreciate that. I feel, well, it didn't 100% grab me like fully. Like I was into it for like the entirety of it. There was a moment that I was particularly bored, but I didn't feel super grabbed by the plot until there's that twist when he reunites with his mother and talks with her for like the first time. Spoilers. Turns out she was plotting the murder of her husband and getting together with with his brother the whole time, and then they make out for a second, and that was really fucking weird. But and that
well,
was what I was into. But
it's almost,
it's that knife twist of a thing that's what really hooked me, and I feel like they could
yeah.
have pushed some of that a little further, like really. I, but I really appreciated that kind of twist still. Like that really made
And
me
that's
kind of
the,
it changed my perception of everything that had happened up until that point, and that's when I thought it was really getting interesting.
well, no, I agree. I mean, that's kind of what I was talking about with Nate. Is like there's that sort of sense of like this is doing its own thing. And I mean it. I will say that scene in particular was so out of left field. I did not expect it. It is just, I mean, it's masterfully done. Yeah, that's a real turning point in the film where you have this bizarre sort of like Freudian twist. it's, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
it works. It
And there's
works
good
though.
build up
I
to it
never.
true.
too. Like it doesn't just
I,
No,
I,
fall
I,
there's
down.
definitely.
and I think I just wanted more of that. I wanted to be surprised
Yeah.
more. Like I wanted there, like once things set in motion, and once he establishes the MO, like it's very clear kind of cut, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I guess for a film of this kind of caliber, I just really wanted to be thrown kind of for a loop, I guess. And it's funny because we were talking about how incomprehensive Pathfinder was earlier, and how that's like I don't get what's going on, nor do I care. Where a film like this has the potential where it's like I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I really want to figure that out, and that's a completely different type of engagement, right? And this film has that. I feel like it could have gone a little bit further with it. Like in Canada, this is rated 14A, which is basically the equivalent of a PG-13, and I'm really curious what like a hard R rating film would have been like in
It
this. And I
was
don't know.
rated R here in
I mean,
America.
it's pretty brutal. Like, I think it does.
It is pretty brutal. I mean,
true.
Yeah, it got the R here in America, and to no one's surprise, I guess.
But I mean, yeah, there's that whole scene where the guy's basically disemboweled.
Oh, yeah. One thing I did appreciate about the violence is that yes, it's brutal, yes, it's disgusting, but it's not silly. Like, it doesn't hit that level where it's just way too over the top, where it just ends up being goofy. Like, it's all very grounded and believable, and that's one aspect I did appreciate about it. But I think I'm gonna have to go with Deep Focus Lens here, where I absolutely was not grabbed by this film at all. And the plot twist is interesting, but I'm kind of with you, Devin, where I thought, like, I needed this earlier. Like, where was this earlier in the movie? I was just so uninvested at that point that it didn't really sway me all that much. It was impressive. It was well done. I didn't see it coming, but I just didn't care at that point. And that's kind of how I felt about this movie, is that I just really didn't care about anything that was going on, because none of the relationships felt earned or well developed in any way, and it could have used its slower moments in the film to do that, to build on that, but it just doesn't. It just
I wouldn't be that harsh on it. There was a lot of great stuff that I appreciated this. I just wanted to see things go just a little bit further, because and I guess I just wanted to have more mindfuckery going on. But that said, there's a lot in this film that I appreciated.
I think if that twist came earlier in the movie, I feel like it would have been a disservice, because like the whole reason that twist is so good is because after all this time, after all this effort, after all that, like, Skarsgård, Hamlet. I think it's funny that his name is just Hamlet, which is just fucking Hamlet. After all this time, everything Hamlet is doing is a fucking amounts to a lie. And I feel like if you had done that any earlier, the shock factor wouldn't have been as powerful. If you found that out earlier in the film, you wouldn't have been so taken by it.
Well, no, that's true. I think the timing of it was great, and from that moment on, like, he eventually somewhat succeeds. Like, he has, well, there's that security that his children are going to be fine, or at least in his mind that's what he thinks, and he goes back and he does succeed in killing the guy. But I almost wanted to see it go even further with how wrong could he have been, or how twisted was his perception as a child, really, and really go down a much darker path. Like, I don't know, it could have gone completely the other direction, or at least even further there, where he, for all this time and investment and him dedicating his life to us, maybe he was just flat out wrong about the entire situation and how dark can those implications be. And this is where I wanted to bring the comparison to The Green Knight, which I know you didn't like, Steven, but I think that film shows how, someone being so misguided in an attempt to do something, what kind of paths that can lead to. And when someone is so convicted in something that just turns out to be fundamentally flawed in some sense, what kind of places that can lead to. And I just find that so fascinating.
I'm going to disagree with you here, because I think if you had that kind of scene in this film where it's like, here's what happens if he doesn't do this thing, I feel like it would cheapen it. I feel like this is more of an emotional film. This is more of a film that is, kind of wrapped up in these more like complex ideas. And I feel like if you explain it to the audience like that, it would lessen the impact.
It doesn't need to explain to the audience.
I'm not saying to explain it. I'm just saying, how off the rails could this get? Like, after him finding out that everything he's leading up to is a lie, how more unraveled could that be? I feel like he still somewhat succeeded in what his initial goal was, but I don't think it really explored just how much of a mess he created. I don't know.
Well, I don't think that that was the purpose of the film. I mean, if you look at the film, it's like that scene with Bjork, shall I say?
Yes.
I want to pronounce this properly. But no, but she's actually appearing to him in a vision and being like, "This is your destiny. You strayed from the path, and you're off, pillaging villages and all this stuff, and you need to, be, good to the promise you made as a child." And it's like this, it's exploring this kind of Viking philosophy of fate and dying an honorable death in battle, and these sort of father-son relationships and what it means to be a man. And I feel like I don't know, I mean, it worked for me. I mean, I think that it was fairly straightforward. I thought it set a clear sort of plot and a clear goal. And I mean, I think it did get pretty messy. I mean, but I think it's it's a period piece. It's dealing with a society that sort of trades on honor, and this is how they would want to die. I mean, if we look at Valhalla Rising, that's kind of like a similar theme there, where it's like he has to get to the top of the mountain, he has to die in battle, he calls to the warriors to kill him. And so I think it's important to remember those sort of things in context in a story like this. And I think all of it is explained pretty well. I mean, I think it fits. To me, this is like a Mad Max Fury Road or like a Drive, where you have this sort of straightforward, story that is held up by this really art house fare. I mean, this incredible cinematography, incredible, production design. This is like right up my alley as far as films go.
Oh yeah, like the production value and everything that went into this is absolutely impeccable. Like I really
No,
I really felt like I lived and breathed this world and environment, and I really appreciate that and that immense,
no, and it's
care,
funny because
and detail into it. I appreciate all of that. I
no, and
feel like it
it's
could have
actually
just pushed it ever so slightly further, where like
well, I
there's a
mean,
scene, but before he meets Bjork, this is when they're like raiding the village, and he has this like moment of reflection where he's kind of doing the thing that traumatized him as a child. Where, I actually I had this line come to my mind as I was watching. Yeah, it's kind of a joke where it's like, after a while, all this raping and pillaging sort of loses its uh, you know, flair after a while. Like suddenly I'm just not feeling it anymore. But there was a scene in this where they start burning that hut with the people inside. That is very reminiscent or very much from like Come and See.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that film, but that's a film that pushes things to a place that you don't expect and really makes you kind of question your view of reality a little bit. And I guess just because it reminded me of that, and certain sequences also reminded me of The Fountain. I guess the films that really did that. You could also compare this to Mandy in a sense, and when you're talking about like it takes a simple plot, but then has this really beautiful art house kind of execution of it.
well,
Anyway,
I mean, Come and See is doing something entirely different. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a fair comparison. Now,
well, no, it's the hut burning specifically that reminded me of Come and See.
No, and I mean, I would agree with you on Mandy, but I think this is light years above Mandy. I mean, this is.
I disagree, but I disagree, but I can see why I can see why you would say that. It's fair for you to say, but personally, I prefer Mandy.
Yeah, I think I do.
Sure,
too.
and I mean, there's something
Love
about
Mandy.
it. I mean, I get the comparison.
I absolutely love Mandy, and
a lot of people do. That didn't work.
And Nathan, I know you love Mandy so much. You wrote a song based on it.
I did write a song about it.
Shameless self-promotion on the podcast.
Keep going.
No, but no. I mean, I think this film has the potential to go on and be a classic. I think people are going to need to find it. This film did not do great at the box office, unfortunately.
Which is unfortunate.
Which is
a shame. Like,
yeah.
It's a crime.
Oh, it's an absolute shame. I wish I had watched this before I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that blew kind of my expectations for a theater going experience out of the water. Um, I'm not saying that this film is any lesser because of that, but man, this it still is a great film.
Well, and I mean, when I look at this kind of scratches that itch where you're like, this is it's straightforward in a way, and it's like you could go into this as a casual sort of film goer and have a good time with it. Like, it's definitely a popcorn film. There's action, there's adventure, there's sex and violence and all these things that you look for. But at the same time, it's like there is this kind of deeper text to it, and I mean, I feel like we need more of these films. I feel like this is what is going to heal cinemas and get people back. I don't know that they're quite ready for it, but I think this is a massive step in the right direction.
Oh yeah. This and Everything Everywhere All at Once, I think, will save cinema. And everything that you're saying is what I would apply to that film, as well, which is completely off topic. But I'm 100% for that sentiment. I do want to see more films like this that have this kind of ambition and have this kind of stellar cast behind it and direction behind it.
And
maybe
passion.
maybe I just had somewhat heightened expectations after seeing The Lighthouse, and I really wanted to be completely mentally, thrown for a loop in that kind of sense. So maybe I was having that certain kind of expectation in mind, where the ambition of this film is a little different, where they are going for this kind of straightforward, a little more like straightforward kind of narrative, but there is that, scale of ambition to it. I really loved the dream sequences in this. Like I said, it reminded me somewhat of The Fountain, which is a film I absolutely adore.
Yeah,
but
no, for
the
sure.
film doesn't even feel consistent. Sorry, real quick. The film doesn't even feel consistent in being the generic revenge movie. Like, it feels like it's stuck between, being an epic revenge story with sex, love, violence, and a tragic story, like tragic love story and a tragic family story. But it's also like a slow burn, small community gets, is driven against each other like The Witch was. But it also feels like it's trying to capture the magic of the lighthouse to me, with all the dream sequences and did it really happen elements with like the Droger and the Valkyrie. Like, it doesn't feel like it has a consistent tone or leg to stand on. And I feel like Robert Eggers couldn't decide if he wanted to fully devote, to making an epic fantasy movie, or if he wanted to do another psychedelic, crazy, drug fueled experience like with The Lighthouse or to The Witch to a certain extent, because that's what people want to see. It doesn't feel consistent to me.
Does it have to be one or the other, though? I mean, I feel like there's fair room for elements of all that kind of stuff in the film. Especially
my problem is it doesn't gel. Like, the elements don't gel for me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's more than welcome to blend the elements, but it doesn't
disagree. I disagree. I think it works well together. I think that I felt like if there was any tonal inconsistency, for me at least, I would have been taken out of it. But I feel like when it comes to Viking culture, all this stuff about prophecy and all this stuff about, surrealism and this fantasy, especially when it comes to Norse mythology, I found that it was easy for me to accept the sort of surreal elements because the culture is so founded in that. The Norse religion alone is so wrapped up in all these things about prophecy, all these things about stuff that's basically otherworldly. It felt like it fit right at home to me.
Well, I
love
would
those
agree
elements.
with that.
I love those elements are there, but it didn't feel like it gelled with the rest of the movie to me. Like,
I think it does. I mean, it's a film where the entire sort of, the quest is given to him by this ghostly, witch, Björk. I mean, who's like this raven, actually like a seer in Norse mythology. So, I mean, I don't think that
the ravens are the presence of Odin. That's
right. No, but that's what I'm saying. It's like when that's in the first 20 minutes or so, I didn't find it unbelievable for later on in the film for them to, reference the Tree of Life or have this sort of like, Valkyrie sequence. I didn't think that it was that out of place. I think if anything, it complemented the revenge plotline.
No, I think I think a lot of the stuff in here really felt authentic to the culture, and these things felt organically placed. Like those sequences didn't feel out of place for me. They felt like these were the type of visions, these are the type of ideas that these people had, and they saw them as these profound, like, goalposts to hit. Like, oh, I see that, that you're gonna have 2 children, but I want to try to have this thing both ways. This is actually kind of interesting, where it's like he said that I was given a choice. Either I have to love my kin or hate my enemy, and he says I want to try to do both. But ultimately he ends up pulling himself away from one or the other. And I feel like they could have, I don't know. I'm kind of curious what the aftermath would have been with his wife. Like, what actually happened with her afterwards? Did things go the way he envisioned, or did they not?
They answer that though, because when he kisses her neck, he has this vision of the Tree of Life, and it's extremely implied that his children will go on to be the future heirs of the kingdom. Like his daughter will be a queen, essentially.
Well, yes, it's implied, and that's a vision that he has, but does it actually happen? I mean, maybe I'm just wanting to really see that, but it's like.
But this is like the ending of Prisoners. It's like if you see him getting pulled out of the ground, does it really?
Different.
You lose some of the impact.
That is incredibly different.
I would compare it to Pan's Labyrinth, where in her mind, spoilers for this movie, in her mind, when she dies in Pan's Labyrinth, she ascends to heaven. Like this was the ultimate test. Like I shed my blood and now I've ascended to heaven. But then you cut back to reality and realize, well, at least outside of her mind, she's just, a dead girl on the pavement, and it just contrasts these two things. And I think maybe I just wanted a little more contrast of what was fantasy in his mind, or what was in his mind this fate and this destiny, versus maybe a quote unquote reality of things. Maybe I just wanted a little more push and pull. But that said, I still appreciated it.
Problem though, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, no, yeah. I'm just outlining what I wanted to see.
Those ideas, but it doesn't do anything with it. Like, I don't think it is just a me problem. I think the film
it does something. It does something with it, but I wanted to see it just a little push more. I just wanted to push it just a tad more. This is again nitpicking.
Yeah. I don't want to make it seem like I hate this movie. Like, there is a lot I do appreciate about it. Like, it's Robert Eggers' attention to detail and historical accuracy is just on full display. Like, the film looks fantastic. The production design and costume design looks very convincing and lived in. The music I thought was great. The first Robert Eggers movie not to be scored by Mark Corvin, but they did an excellent job of all the instruments and the chanting. Anytime you add chanting to his film soundtrack, by the way, immediate chef's kiss. Just makes it 10 times better for me.
I love the whole throat singing thing. It's something that I practice my own time that I'm not gonna grace your ears with right now. But I loved, and no, ever since hearing that in Dune, and then this movie, I just love hearing that kind of overtone throat singing, and it feels very tribalistic. It actually reminded me a lot of the band Hyalung. I don't know if anybody knows them, but it's the kind of music you listen to and it makes you want to move out into the woods and start a cult. I mean, they pull a lot from Norse mythology and Proto-Germanic like languages, and they take like old poetry that's written back in those eras, and they interpret it into music. And man, just I'll put a link in the thing, but check out Hyalung playing live. You'll see videos on YouTube. Sure fantastic stuff.
And the performances are pretty solid overall. Like, I wouldn't put this against any of the actors. They all do a great job of what they're given. Stellan Skarsgård. Sorry, Alexander. I don't know which Skarsgård it is, but he was excellent. Like, I don't think I've ever seen him this good in anything before, but he really drives it home, not just for his emotional performance, but his physical one. Like, the man went through a really rough and brutal exercise program in order to get in shape for his character, and he is a thick boy. His shoulders are twice the size of the rest of his fucking body, and I appreciate that level of dedication to, like, performing the role of an action character. But I don't know, it's just just couldn't connect with the story at all. Unfortunately, it didn't know what it wanted to be. It felt very poorly written. Like there were a lot of plot conveniences.
You just didn't know what you wanted to be, or you didn't know what it wanted to be.
I didn't know what it wanted to be, and I don't think the film knew what it wanted to be. Personally,
I gotta disagree with that. I think that this film set out to be an elevated blockbuster.
It set out to be that. I don't think it achieved it.
I disagree.
I disagree. I think it knows what it wants to be, and it was really convicted. I just wanted to see it be pushed ever so slightly more, and I would have absolutely loved it. I still really, really liked it.
What would you guys?
Yeah, no, I mean, for me personally, let's start with Nate. Is Nate still here?
Hey, Nathan, you with us?
I know Ian just dropped a giant ass stink bomb on this film, but we need to we want to clear the air.
Did I break you, Nathan? I'm sorry.
And get into some ratings.
I'm sorry. I feel bad.
His audio's
you're bad, and your opinion is bad.
Yeah.
And you should
maybe
feel
his
bad.
audio just isn't working right now, but
yeah.
Well, I'll open the floor. I mean, for me personally, this is a 9.5 out of 10. This is movie of the year. Might be one of the best movies of the last decade or so. I loved this film. I loved what it accomplished. I think it is just masculine and brutal and metal as fuck.
That's true.
It is pretty fucking metal.
Yeah. What are you giving this, Nate?
Honestly, it's like a 9.5 to 10 out of 10 for me. I gave it a 5 star. I gave it a 5 stars on Letterboxd just because I couldn't not. It had so many elements that I really loved. One of my favorite things about the film, and this is such a small detail, but when I was in college, I took a Viking literature class, and my professor, he just knows anything and everything about Viking culture. He taught us so much that I couldn't even so much that I can't even retain all of it. But I'm going up to Oregon in about in a couple of weeks. I'm gonna have a catch up session with him and probably talk about this film and
nice.
Review some of the things that he taught me about Viking culture. But one of my favorite little details about this film was, so you remember when he fights the Draugr and he cuts its head off?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know what he did was he took the head and he placed it on its ass, and that is
that's accurate. Yeah.
That's a small little detail in Viking lore. When you kill the undead, you're supposed to stick the head up the ass.
Now, see,
I actually really like that whole sequence, and this is the thing that I really liked. I like that he has this fight with this creature, this Adrul, who gets paralyzed in the sunlight, but then the camera dollies back and reveals that he imagined that whole thing, and he was just preparing himself in case this thing reanimated and came back to life, but then it just fell to dust as that he took the sword away. And I wanted to see more reveals like that. I wanted to be led to believe a certain thing from the character's perspective, and then to get the rug pulled out from under me. It happened a couple times in that scene, and with his thing with the mother. And I guess I just wanted to have that happen one or two times more. I wanted the rug to really get pulled out from under me, and everything I was coming up to and believing in was a lie. Well, maybe that's what I personally wanted from this film. For me, it's a solid 8 still.
Ooh.
Yeah, for me, I would give this thing. If I didn't see Everything Everywhere All at Once before this, I'd probably give it a 9.5. This film is still a solid 8 for me.
I think that there was
Everything Everywhere is a 10.
Oh, I loved Everything Everywhere. I thought Everything Everywhere was fantastic.
Still need to see it.
I did like this better though. I did like this better. I saw Everything Everywhere first.
Yeah, I saw it just last week, and it's best film of the year for me. But no, that's cool. I like that. Well, you also really studied this literature with this person, and that's a great way for you to reconnect with that person later. So I could tell that this was absolutely right up your alley, and I'm glad that we're talking to somebody that really appreciates this and really has a learned understanding of what they're referencing. I'm wondering if there's a lot of stuff in here that I just missed out because I have no idea about the culture. It feels authentic to me, but there's no way I know for sure. And I like that you pointed out that, facts about him shoving the head up the ass and how that's a, yeah, that's something that they would do.
Yeah, no, that's something that in Viking culture they would do. This is very reminiscent of a lot of the Icelandic family sagas, which like there's something called like I mean there's something called a man price, which is like basically the Viking law is there are disputes that are settled at what are called things. And basically the way that a thing works is that if there's a dispute, one guy shows up, brings his guys. The other guy shows up, brings his guys. Whoever has more guys basically wins. But a lot of Viking culture is about family, is about honor, is about vengeance and revenge. And like if a member of your family is killed, you are expected to basically take the man price and be revenged. So that's I just thought that this film was so authentic to Viking culture, and it was so just you could tell that Robert Eggers really did his research and really paid attention to all the details about this ancient culture. And like for me, just like honestly, my favorite moment in the film, aside from the volcano fight, which was
dope. Oh, that was badass. That was on par with like Mordor and the whole fight sequence in Revenge of the Sith on whatever that planet is. I mean, this feels like the real world version of those events.
I think we cut out. What happened?
Oh, we didn't cut out. You cut out, Steven. I can hear him just fine.
I cut out. Okay.
What'd you cut out on?
I cut out on Nate talking about Viking mythology. I was very captivated. I was listening, and then suddenly my signal dropped, I guess.
Well, we're talking about how metal the volcano fight is at the end.
The volcano fight was fantastic.
It is funny. My buddy turned to me at this point when we were in the theater and said, "How much do you want to bet there's a who has the high ground joke?" So it was a great time. Like I said, this was my first trip back to the cinema. I think this is a film that deserves to be seen in theaters. But yeah, you could probably watch it at home and have a good time. I'm anxious to see it again.
I am too. Another great thing about the volcano fight sequence is that there are a lot of tropes in Viking mythology, and there were a few things that that were a little glossed over, because in Viking literature, swords that have names always fail. They're always they either shatter or they fail in some way, but named swords always fail. But there's also another popular Viking trope, which is the double death blow, and I was so excited to see it at the end of the film. I just thought it was a perfect, like, it felt like a Viking story because it had a lot of these tropes from Viking culture and from Viking literature.
That's cool.
I loved the close up of the sword as they were forging it, and like the texturing of it looks kind of like Damascus steel. I don't know if that was something that they actually created back to the Zorth days, but I just love that kind of marbling effects that they had on that sword kind of in the middle. But it is interesting that it gives it a name, and that you say that they would fail, like almost like
usually
giving it a name. Yeah, well, I'm curious if is that just a practical thing that happened, or is this just sort of like a Macbeth kind of situation where people just say it's cursed?
It's usually cursed. Like there are a few things in Viking culture and in Viking literature which usually to wear marked clothing, the reason that most Vikings fought basically naked is that to wear like a colored cloak or whatever is to mark yourself, and you are basically going to die. That's like to mark yourself or to distinguish yourself in that way, you're fucking dead. And naming your sword, that thing's gonna fucking shatter. It's gonna fail.
Just because like engraving a name on there weakens the blade. Like, I'm just curious where that came from, or if that's.
I don't know if it's just the engraving. I think it's just like to be marked or to be distinguished. is to ensure your death, basically. Like, and I think that goes for like swords and clothing.
Okay. No, I like the fact that this is all represented here somehow. Like, they he names his horde, but in a sense he's sealing his fate while doing so, and there is a sense of sort of like fatalism and determinism in his end goals, and I did find that really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what the bigger point I was going for there, but
sure
no, I did like seeing that. I think I just kind of wanted to see again have that feeling of like the rug being pulled out from under me, when watching it. But I still really enjoyed the overall kind of plot development and the way it progressed. Like, I thought it was beautifully done, still, and with a lot of intention.
Yeah, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. I really wish
Jeez.
I liked it more than I did.
Fucking fence sitter.
It is a very couple. Why you booing me? I'm right.
No, you're not right. You're being a pretentious asshole. I mean, this is the most nitpicking I've ever heard.
No, it's how I felt.
This is the podcast. We're pretentious asshats.
Exactly.
God.
Or
like
prestigious connoisseurs, depending on the platform.
Also, I thought we said we wouldn't
use
that word anymore.
I feel like this is a movie that pretentious asshats would like. Also, another thing that I just remembered. So remember when he dismembers those guys and arranges them into the shape of a horse on a barn?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. That's a curse. That's a curse. So in Viking culture, there's something called a need stick, which is basically a stick with a horse's head on it, and you use it to curse other people. So there's this kind of there's this thing. It's the dismembered men in the shape of a horse is like kind of reminiscent of a kneading stick, which is used for cursing other people. Also,
it's also worth noting they played with something similar to that in Valhalla Rising. They had Mads Mikkelsen put a guy's head on a stick. So yeah, I had read something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt bad for laughing when I saw it. Just I wasn't expecting to see that like level of dismemberment and rearrangement, and it's on screen for like less than a second, and I just had that like reaction when I saw it. It almost reminded me of there's two things. There's that horse head being found in the guy's bed in The Godfather, and then the house that Jack built.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Which you haven't seen that movie yet.
I love
that
movie.
No, but I saw a screenshot of the house, and I'm like, man, I don't know if that would be my choice building material. I'm sure you could do much better for a trip to Home Depot. I mean, maybe it's an art project, man. I don't know the context of the situation, but I don't know. Spoilers. Dead bodies isn't the best building material for building a house. I mean, it doesn't seem like a good. Anyway, that's an aside. But I just had that kind of laugh reaction when I saw the dismembered people being put in the shape of a horse, as utterly terrifying as that is. And yeah, cursed I think is the right word for it. And that seems to be the myth and or the belief in Viking culture is that is a great way to curse people. Holy fuck.
Yeah.
Yummy.
There's you're also not supposed to burn a homestead while people are inside of it.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, well,
no.
I mean, they have a particular belief about the hearth being sacred, so you're not to burn one in their home is like the equivalent to a sin, and
it's adding insult to injury. Yeah, I mean, and it was that house burning that reminded me of Come and See, which I think does it even more terrifyingly, but very different film, very different context.
Yeah, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Come on, that's very different movie, very different context.
Oh, definitely. Like I'm only comparing it because I saw it recently, and this is like comparing theater going experiences. I will say though, getting back out to the theater these days is a lot more exciting than anything the MCU's been putting out. Although Multiverse of Madness does look interesting. Okay, just
I trust
again,
Multiverse of Madness not because it's Marvel, but because it's Sam Raimi.
And because I like the first movie.
Also, I like Doctor Strange. Like, of all the MCU stuff, I just love seeing all these, like, CPUs rendering out these trippy fractal rearrangements of reality. That's fucking cool. I want to see that. And all their Disney money being fed into these trippy visuals. I love that. I want more of that.
And I think that's one of the best MCU movies. Like, I generally think it's great. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job. He has a great arc. And the final climax is so entertaining and unique. Like, it's unique.
And again, completely irrelevant to the conversation, just as it came up. Personal PSA: anyone that wants to go see Multiverse of Madness, watch Everything Everywhere All at Once first. Give that movie all your money.
Yes.
And this movie.
Yeah.
Give these movies all your money, because we want to see more movies like this. Period.
I agree.
I think movies. I want to see more movies that are like this, that are independently funded or produced, made with
art house blockbusters need to be more of a thing.
It needs to be a thing.
No, I agree, and I said this recently in a group. It's like, you know, on Facebook, and it may have been the A24 group. It may have been one of those, but I was making the point that it's like people are so tired of you know, going to the theater, and it's like you can watch Spider-Man No Way Home, or you know, you can watch something like, you know, Saint Maud or something. I mean, I'm using that as an example, but something that is so art house that it doesn't have the appeal that some of these, you know, that films like this, The Northman, something like you know, I would say Uncut Gems, or maybe like a Brawl in Cell Block 99. It's like or Everything Everywhere, but it's like it has its own style, it has its own aesthetic, it's an original piece of work, but you know, it has a large enough appeal, and I think that's what we need more of. I mean, The Northman is a breath of fresh air, and I mean, to me, giving it anything more than a 9.5 is just, I mean, I'm sorry, but just wrong. Like, this is,
I mean, hey, 8's pretty decent.
And 5's halfway there. Like, come on, it could have been worse.
Man,
living on a prayer. That's what you are.
Exactly.
With that score.
We're halfway there, man. Thank you so much, Nathan,
Lemon
for joining
and
in.
A pear.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for
Squidward
joining
and a
in.
pear.
And thank you, Stephen, for returning as our guest.
Absolutely.
Stephen, what fresh hell awaits us next week?
Well, I will not be here, but you gents will be discussing anthologies.
Yes!
Which is
I'm so excited.
CHADS episode.
Let's get him on here.
Yeah, you'll be discussing, let's see, I believe it's Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Animatrix.
You're going to be Animatrix and Trick or Treat. So a bunch of short stories and big film.
So I can actually watch all of them.
Hey. All right. Well, until next time.
Stay tuned for Conan.
No, you do this every time. I try to set you up, and you're supposed to say, "Is it Thursday yet?"
Oh.
And then I say,
"Stay tuned."
Stay tuned.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
You screw it up every time.
I'm leaving this in, by the way.
Swap scripts.
Take two.
All right. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
Is it first day yet?
Stay tuned for Conan, everybody. Good night.